Good evening. Welcome back. We're going to try this again with Chapter 4 of Protector of the Small, Book 2, page. We're going analog this time. Chapter 4 Woman Talk. Their punishments for the stable fight cooled the hottest tempers. Kell thought just the addition of 2 more harness weights would have done it. Even the fourth-year pages were not ready for the change, and it was astonishing how much difference an extra pound made. For weeks, Kell felt as if her bones had turned to wax. Master Oakbridge, whose etiquette class was at the end of the day, began to hit their desk with his pointer stick to keep them awake. Extra work, given when sleepy pages didn't finish classwork, piled on top of Lord Wilden's physical penalties. Bread and water suppers did not help. Scant meals on their schedule meant growling bellies. Sometimes Cal thought it was hunger and the prospect of added weights, rather than insults that cut 2 ways, that made Joran and his friends leave her and the crowd alone. 2 Sundays went to rebuilding the page's stable. Once that was done, Cal returned to her earlier punishment, forking down hay from a stable loft. For a week she dripped sweat as she pitched hay down 14 feet to the floor. Her fright turned the distance into miles. Once that week ended, she enjoyed the absence of fear until the day she was tardy to a class. Lord Wilden gave her 1 bell of time to climb to the palace wall and map the ground between it and the temple district. Every time she was late, Lord Wilden found dirt on Peach Blossom's tack, or someone noticed she had lit a candle after lights out. The training master found Kell work on heights. Neil was sure it was torture. Kell argued that Lord Wilden helped her to become a better knight by forcing her to manage her fear. Prince Rold finally tired of the debate and said it was a little of both. He didn't want to hear the subject discussed again. Every morning and every evening, when she opened the large shutters, Jump bounced into her room. Kell's sparrows made a game of it, clinging to the dog's fur and trying to stay on as he leaped. Lalassa seemed to enjoy it. She gave the dog a treat when no sparrows fell from his back. No matter how often Gower and Kell took the dog up to Dane, Jump returned. Jump returned to her room and to the practice courts. Kell dared not speak to him there. She feared that someone would notice and report it. She was lucky that a dog's presence in the palace was not unusual. The place teemed with dogs. Ratters, hunting dogs, even ladies' lapdogs. As long as none of their teachers thought Jump belonged to any page as a pet, he was free to come and go as he pleased. By the time the leaves turned color, Jump had joined the nighttime study group, and Kell had given up on returning him to Dane. What was the use? He always came back, and she knew Lalassa fed him. Instead, Kell lit a stick of incense, asking the Great Mother to protect him, and resigned herself to her new companion. Jump's snores roused Kell one November morning before dawn. She turned him on his side, he only snored on his back, and waited for sleep to return. It didn't. Instead, she worried. She had plenty to worry about. Once they had the energy, she and her friends had begun their hull patrols, trying to catch Joran and his cronies harassing a first year. They'd had no success. Neil and Cleon thought Joran's crowd had given up. Kell wasn't so sure. Her experience of bullies was that if they weren't doing one thing, they were preparing for something else. It's no good fretting, Kell told herself sternly. Whatever it is, you'll put a stop to it, that's all. She just hoped she'd catch them soon. The suspense was like an itch she couldn't scratch. As soon as she put Joran from her mind, she worried about practice. She had finally gotten used to the weight of the harness. Only a week ago she had started to hit the quintain properly in tilting. Only in the last 2 days had she returned to hitting it correctly on every pass. Just when she'd gotten her skill back, what did Lord Wilden do but announce a change? In another week, he would be replacing the lances of the second, third, and fourth-year pages with swords 2 days a week and axes 2 days a week. Kell wasn't ready for that. Had she noticed the senior pages using other weapons from horseback the year before? She had to smile at the thought. Of course she hadn't. When she concentrated on something, like her long struggle to learn how to tilt, she saw little else. Her smile vanished. I'll talk it over with Peach Blossom, she decided. He may not understand, but perhaps he'll appreciate my making the effort. I just hope I don't bang him with the sword or the axe. Don't think he'll like that. Was it even worth trying to sleep again now, she wondered, eyes on the light gray sky beyond the upper shutters. Chances were she would doze off just as the bell rang for the day to start. She rolled out of bed and carefully opened the lower shutters so she could see. If she lit a candle, Lalassa would be awake within moments, asking if she could serve Cal. And this, even though the dressing room door was shut. Cal sighed quietly, and wished it was as easy to like Lalassa as it was to like Jump. Certainly the girl was useful. She smuggled Jump's food into Kel's room when no one was the wiser. She kept things neater than Kel had ever done. If only she laughed more and talked about things. She relaxed only with the animals, but not Kel, and she mourned each and every tear in tear in Kel's garments as if a friend had died. If only she wouldn't be so skittish, thought Kel, slipping her weighted harness over her nightgown. She creeps about like a mouse, flinching whenever you look at her. Do you want to just give her something to flinch about? She's afraid of me. What have I done to deserve it? Only thought about smacking some life into her, and I know she can't hear my thoughts. If she could, she'd know I felt bad just thinking about that. Her job with Kel was safe. Baron Piers and Lady Elaine had sent money for the girl's wages for a year. Kel had paid Lalassa then and there. There was no reason for the girl to think Kel might dismiss her after receiving a year's wages. She said little to Kel, but yes, my lady, and no, my lady, or for a change, I'll see, my lady. Kel was a friendly girl. It hurt that Lalassa couldn't be easy around her. It was also uncomfortable, tiptoeing about her own rooms for fear she might startle her new companion. Kel bent to touch her toes and heard a rip. Her nightgown, more than a bit snug around the shoulders these days, had gotten caught under the harness and torn. Wriggling, Kel tried to get more comfortable fit out of the gown and harness. Could leather shrink? The thing had been perfectly comfortable when it was first made. She touched her toes again. The seam that had ripped a moment ago tore further. She growled a Yamani curse and tugged the harness again. My lady, that won't help. Lalassa walked out of the dressing room, a robe clutched over her bedgown. This time, Kel thought a whole string of Yamani curses. Keeping her face calm, she said, You really don't have to be up. You know I won't need you till the bell rings. Normally, something that close to a reprimand would have sent Lalassa scurrying from the room. Now, however, she strode forward, hands outstretched. If you please, my lady. She actually touched Kel, sticking her slim fingers under the shoulder straps of the harness and lifting it off. Lalassa inspected the harness in the very dim light, exploring its seams and joins with her hands. Kel, intrigued, poked up the fire and lit candles. I can do nothing about this, the older girl said, putting the harness down. You need a new one, and that's tanner work. If my lady pleases. She motioned, and Kel turned. Lalassa touched the ripped seam between Kel's shoulder blades, then plucked at sleeve holes, collar, and cuffs. She turned Kel and knelt to pull on the gown's hem. As I thought, she said at last, my lady has grown an inch since this was made. I thought you had trouble tying your points yesterday. Kel made a face. I've been having a cursed time getting my hose up high enough for me to tie them properly, she admitted. Even my breeches are short. It's easy to get new clothing for practice in classes, my lady, Lalassa said. We just trade the old things for new at the palace tailor's. She stood and glanced at Kel, then coughed lightly into her fist. My lady, you have grown elsewhere, too. Oh, my shoulders, Kel said gloomily. That's why the gown's split and why I can't settle that harness comfortably. My waist's a little smaller, though. Lalassa shook her head. Your shoulders are filling out, but those aren't the only things. Kel rubbed her nose. Finally she said, You know, I understand better when people tell me straight out what they're thinking. Lalassa's large dark eyes met hers. She hesitated, then said, Most girls pray for this, my lady. You're getting them young. I didn't show until I was 14. Realizing that Kel still didn't understand, Lalassa cuffed her breasts and let them go. Flabbergasted, Kel stared at the front of her nightgown. Sure enough, there were two slight bulges in the proper area for such things. When had this happened? They weren't large enough to be visible under her loose clothes, but how could she have missed them when she bathed? I hurry when I scrub, she thought, fighting the urge to cross her arms and cover her chest. I'm always thinking about classwork or practice. A cold thought overbore everything else. They'll never let me hear the end of this. She accepted that as soon as she thought it. There was little she could do about the boy's future comments, except choose her clothes with care and hope her new, inconvenient badges of womanhood grew slowly. Lalassa ducked her head. My lady will need breastbands. Oh, splendid, Kel replied. Just what I need. More clothes. She rubbed the back of her neck. When you get those new things from the tailor, make sure they're loose, all right? Most girls rejoice at this, Lalassa pointed out softly. They regard it, and their monthly bleeding, as signs they enter womanhood. Most girls don't have a covey of boys whacking them with sticks every morning. Most girls don't want to be knights. Kel plopped onto the bed. Jump wriggled until he could stick his blunt head under her arm. If this keeps up, eventually I can stop wearing dresses to remind them I'm a girl. I hope it takes a while. A long while. She tucked her chin to look at her front. Lalassa muffled a noise with her hands. It sounded remarkably like a laugh. I'm glad you find it funny, Kel told her with a wry grin. I have to take my lady's measurements afresh, Lalassa said, going into the dressing room, and I need to draw coin from Salma to buy cloth, she called as she opened the box where she kept her sewing things. I can let out many of your personal garments, but nightgowns and breastbands and stockings must be paid for from your own purse. Kel went to her desk and wrote a note to Salma on her message slate. When she had finished, Lalassa approached with a measuring cord. As she slid it around Kel with brisk efficiency, Kel was startled to see they were exactly the same height. She had grown an inch in 3 months. I don't know where I can get the harness let out, she commented. Leave it for me when you come from your bath, Lalassa assured her. I will take it to the tanner. You'll need to give him some encouragement, Kel remarked. If people wanted fast work from palace servants, they paid bribes. In fact, she wiped out her note to Salma and wrote a fresh one, asking her to give Lalassa Kel's pocket money for the quarter. This way you don't have to apply to me, and I don't have to apply to her. You can keep it here and draw what's needed. She handed the slate to Lalassa, who held it with a stunned look on her face. What is it? Kel asked, picking up her glaive. The bell would ring soon. She had to start her practice dances. When Lalassa didn't reply, Kel looked sharply at her. What's wrong? Lalassa was trembling. Aren't you afraid I will steal it? No, Kel said, trying deep knee bends to loosen her legs. Each bend was marked by another tiny rip. It seemed her nightgown had decided to give up completely. You don't run off when I paid you for the year. All nobles think that servants steal. Kel tucked her nightshirt's skirt into the side of her loincloth. People who believe servants will steal usually get servants who do. She swung her glaive. You never gave me any reason to doubt your honesty. For a moment Lalassa said nothing. Then she uttered a soft, "Oh," and set a pot of water over the fire to heat. For the first time since Kel had taken her as a maid, she stayed in the room as Kel performed the complex swings, thrusts, turns, and rolls of a practice dance. She put out fresh seed for the sparrows and laid out Kel's morning clothes. Only when the water on the hearth began to steam did she collect the pot and take it into the dressing room so Kel could wash when she was done. That afternoon, in the page's class on magic, Taka, the basilisk, began to speak of how the Yamanis practiced magic. Knowing of Kel's 6 years there, he called on her. When Kel mentioned that she had a spirit bag, an amulet created for her by a Yamani shaman, Taka asked if she would let the class see it. Kel bowed to him. She had gotten over the strangeness of having an 8-foot-tall gray lizard as a teacher months before, and went to her rooms. About to turn into the page's hall, she felt an itch and halted, making a face. The breastband she had on was crisp new linen, and it itched. She glanced around. No one was there to see. Hiking up her tunic, she scratched her ribs through her shirt. From the page's wing she heard a man say, "Don't be shy. If you're nice, I'll get you a better place than working for the crazy Mindlin girl." He spoke quietly, but he couldn't have been far away. "You waste your prettiness toiling after a mad page." There was a reply, in a female voice far softer than the man's. It was Lalassa, and she was frightened. Quickly, Kel tugged her tunic over her hips and walked into the page's wing. A man in servant's clothes had backed Lalassa up against Kel's door. He leaned against it, trapping the maid between his arms. Her eyes were huge as he stared up at her. In one hand she held a brand-new weighted leather harness. Kel strode forward briskly. "What is your name, and what business do you have with my maid?" she demanded, sharp-voiced. "Step away from her at once." It didn't matter that he was a grown man. She was a noble, and she knew her rights. He looked at her. He was in his early 20s, with a wiry frame. His dark eyes flashed with annoyance as he drew away from Lalassa and bowed. "I am Hugo Longley, if it please you, my lady. We were just having a friendly chat." "It didn't look friendly to me. What palace service are you in?" Kel asked. He frowned, but he dared not defy a noble, even one who was only a page. "I am a clerk in the palace stores. We have an understanding, Lalassa and me." "My lady, I swear, I was just getting the harness, and he approached me." Lalassa's eyes were frantic. "I wasn't idling, and we don't have an understanding." Kel felt very cold inside. How dare he frighten Lalassa? "If you are in palace stores, Hugo Longley, then no doubt they miss your work," she said, her hands on her hips. "If you bother Lalassa again, I'll report you. Be about your business." She met his eyes squarely, letting him know he didn't frighten her in the least. He looked like the sort who enjoyed other people's fear. The man hesitated, then bowed grudgingly and left. Only when he was gone from view did Lalassa say, "My lady, please. I didn't want him, and I wasn't lazing about." Kel fished out her key and put it in the lock. "I know you weren't." She unlocked the door and went to her desk. "It's plain at the nose on my face that you wanted him 1,000 leagues away." She found the shaman bag and tucked it into her belt purse. "As for idling, you don't really have to stay here all the time. Don't you have friends to visit or errands to run?" Lalassa tugged at the straps of the harness. "I like to stay here. Nobody bothers me but the dog and the birds, and I like them." "Well, think about it," Kel said. "Honestly, I'm not your jailer. And if that Longley comes near you again, tell me. Understand? I mean it." Lalassa nodded, but Kel wasn't convinced. There was no time to argue, though. She had already taken longer on her errand than she should. She ran back to class, thinking every step of the way. That night, when she went to her rooms after supper, she brought Neil and left the door open. "I don't care if you don't like it," Kel told Lalassa sternly. "We're going to show you holds that will help you, discourage someone from bothering you." Lalassa stared at Neil, who rubbed the delighted jump on his belly as if he were an ogre. "At the very least you'll convince them that you meant no when you said no." "Page Nealon?" she asked, prodding her friend with her foot. Neil looked at her, eyes filled with mischief. Something odd filled Kel's chest for a moment. Why did she feel giddy? "If this isn't friendship, what is?" he asked cheerfully. "After people abuse my poor body all morning in the courts, I'm going to let her bruise me some more." He offered Kel a large, bony hand. It felt uncommonly warm in hers, and she pulled him to his feet. Once he was up, she dropped his hand as if it were a hot brick. "I won't bruise you much. Quit complaining," she ordered. "Lalassa, stand close so you can see what I do." Lalassa circled Neil as if she thought he was a hot brick, until she stood behind Kel. "You won't see a thing if you look at the floor," Kel chided her. "Neil, grab my arm and get ready for pain." When he obeyed, Kel showed Lalassa several ways to get free. She bent Neil's finger back, dug her nails into the crescent at the base of one of his fingernails, pinched the web between his thumb and forefinger with her nails, thrust a fingernail between the veins and tendons of his wrist, and gripped his hand with both of hers, forcing the thumb or little finger against his palm. She made the Lhasa try each defense on her, since the maid refused to touch Neil. They showed the Lhasa how to turn an attacker's arm until she forced it back up behind his back. Next, they demonstrated how to stamp on an enemy's instep when she was seized from behind, as well as eye gouges, nose and throat punches, and even the simple knee to the groin. By the time they had walked the cringing Lhasa through it all, an audience had gathered at Kel's open door. "Where did you learn all that?" Owen breathed, his eyes wide. "Some I learned at the Imani court," Kel replied calmly, gulping down a cup of water. "Some Ida Bell taught me this summer." "I'm going to treat you with the reverence I reserve for the crown jewels," Roald assured her, his eyes crinkled with mirth. "Me too," added Severin Merrick. "I'll treat you with reverence once you help me with classwork, O moon of mathematical wisdom," said Cleon lazily. He still addressed Kel by flowery names, not having tired it yet. "And you, girl, take my advice," he added, pointing at Lhasa. "Just carry a lead-weighted baton. Then you don't have to be fancy." As Lhasa protested that she couldn't pick up a weapon, the pages headed to the library. Neil went to fetch his books while Kel gathered all she needed to study. "This isn't the end of it," she told Lhasa firmly. "We're going to practice together till I know you can use any of these things." "That's what I'm afraid of, miss," Lhasa said, sounding as gloomy as her Uncle Gower. "I'll tell you what the Amanis told me," said Kel as Freckle and Crown flew onto her shoulders. "Fear is a good thing. It means you're paying attention." "They sound like wonderful people, I'm sure," replied Lhasa meekly. Kel looked at her. Was that a tiny smile on the older girl's lips? It was. Feeling rather pleased with herself, Kel went to join her friends. Showing Lhasa how to defend herself was fun. Making her practice what she'd shown her was another matter. Kel tried it when she returned that night, and the next morning, and again before bedtime. Lhasa squeaked and cringed, or she treated it as a silly game. While Kel was glad the older girl was comfortable enough to joke, Lhasa's behavior at her lessons was exasperating. She worked her vexation off in the practice courts. When winter arrived with 4 mortal days of sleet and freezing rain, Kel thought she might scream with impatience at being kept indoors. Riding was put aside. Not even giants or spiderins would raid villages when they could slip and break on something, and the movements of their enemies were the measure Lord Wilden used to define how and when they trained. The pages moved to the indoor courts for archery, staff fighting, and unarmed combat. Lord Wilden introduced the first years to basic sword fighting, while the older pages did more complex exercises. During swordplay, Kel's mood improved. Wielding a sword from Peach Blossom's back had made her feel even stupider than her first year, if that was possible. It was nice to know that she hadn't forgotten all she'd learned the year before. She just wasn't good at doing it on horseback yet. The second night of their forced indoor exercises was also Kel's first time that year to wait on Lord Wilden at supper. She had to manage it for 3 nights without mistake. Once that was over, she could relax until midwinter. Serving Lord Wilden, with his sharp eyes and cold manner, had to be worse than waiting on any noble or wealthy merchant in the palace banquet hall. So long as she could serve those people without spills, they would pay attention to their food and their companions, not to her. For the first time since she became a page, Kel began to think she might actually enjoy the 7 days of feasting on the holiday. There we go. Worked out for you, worked out for me. Okay, we'll come back and do chapter 5 tomorrow.